It's great to be back again, and it's a privilege, and thank you all for coming this morning. Hope you're all having a wonderful morning as we're holding a space of love and light for all the things the country is going through and all the things that's happening around the country. I want to start out today by asking you, how many of you know people that don't know that they don't know, but they think that they do know? Does anybody know somebody like that? How many of us know? A lot of us ourselves are that way. How many? It's like we're in grade 3, but we don't know there's a grade 4. So we totally get grade 3, so we're like, oh, I totally get it. But then the whole purpose of life is to get us through university. So it's trying to get us to grade 4. So how is life supposed to get our attention that there's actually a grade 4? Right? And then someone has a breakthrough, and they finally get to grade 4 because life's been kicking their butt trying to get their attention. Then finally they have it, and they go, oh, now I get it. Instead of going, oh, now I get that I don't get it, they go, oh, now I get it. So what does life have to do to get them to grade 5? It has to keep whacking them and whacking them and whacking them until they finally get it that they don't get it. Does that make sense? And then we become what? Then we become open and available. Then life doesn't have to become so hard. Life is not meant to be difficult. It's only when we don't know that we don't know that life gets so difficult. Now, how many of you have had a life-changing experience where you can't go back to the way that you were before? Now, have any of you tried to go back to the way that you were before? I know I certainly tried to do that, and I couldn't do it because I no longer saw the world through the same lens. Does that make sense? Well, it's something I wanted to, a few weeks ago, actually a couple of months ago, a friend of mine in Toronto, he went through some of my workshops back in the early 2000s, and he's become a dear friend, and he sent me this. He wanted to get my feedback on it, and it was about a woman who had a near-death experience. So I'll just read this to you. It says, she had died from stage 4 cancer, but came back to life from another dimension. I actually crossed over to another dimension. I was engulfed in a total feeling of love. I also experienced extreme clarity of why I had cancer, why I had come into this life in the first place, what role everyone in my family played in my life in the grand scheme of things, and how life works in general. The clarity and understanding I obtained in this state is almost indescribable. Words cannot describe the experience. I was at a place where I understood how much more there is than what we are able to conceive in our three-dimensional world. I realized what a gift life is, and that I was surrounded by loving spiritual beings who were always around me, even when I did not know it. So what do you think? So when he sent me that, I said, dude, welcome to my world. I said, that's my normal. What you're describing as a near-death experience isn't actually a near-death experience. It's a near-life experience. What that woman had was an appetizer. It was a taste of what life is like without the separation, without the veil, without the ego, without all the limited beliefs and false identities. And once we break through that veil and begin to experience this as the new normal. How many of you think that sounds pretty good? Can you imagine a world where we look back at war, we look back at dis-ease, we look back at pollution and discrimination, the same way we look back at living like the world was flat? We didn't know that we didn't know, right? So how can you blame us? It's part of the whole process, right? I mean, in hindsight, it looks kind of obvious that the world, I always find it suspicious that they thought the world was flat, but they don't have any records of anyone falling off. Like, how long did they catch on before I think there's something we're missing here, you know? And really what it takes is a higher perspective, isn't it? From what I can tell, the world still looks flat. But from a higher perspective, what do we see? Things are not always as they appear to be, right? And so the same idea, we had this idea that the Earth was the center of the solar system. How long did mankind believe that was the true? And then some guy, came along and said, you know what, I think it's not true. And what happened to him? Yeah, he was killed, right? And then Galileo came along with a telescope and said, you know what, he's right. That it's not as it appears to be. In fact, the sun is the center of the solar system and the Earth is going around that. And what did? They put him under house arrest. And he died at his house because they did not like the idea of change. How long did we live like this was solid? It still appears solid. But what do we know? We know that it's actually made up of what? Molecules. And those molecules are made up of what? Atoms. And those atoms are made up of what? Subatomic particles, which are made up of what? Pure intelligent energy. Imagine that. And so imagine if we don't know that we don't know, but we got then to change our reference point of what is normal, we'll see that dis-ease is in fact part of this intelligent universe that is happening for us. Now, as you know, last time I was here, I told you, when I was 18, being given 15 months to live, that's a great attention getter. I truly recommend it for everyone because it really creates that sense of urgency. Books and attitude, they only get you so far, right? But you can die with a good attitude and a fake smile on your face, but if you really want to get to the cause, you really have to get to the solution. And I was talking earlier, and we were talking about how, I remember being at the doctor, and the doctor is shaking my hand and saying, "Good luck." And I remember thanking the doctor and saying, "Don't worry, I'll take it from here." Because how many of you have ever had that experience where you just know something, but you don't know how you know, you just know that you know, and if you tried to explain it to somebody, you'd sound crazy? Have any of you had that experience? Well, I was feeling that, and I knew that in every cell, every fiber of my being, I knew that it was happening for me. I knew that life was taking me on the path that I needed to be on, and I was preparing me by helping me learn the things that I needed to learn in order to do the work that I came here to do. So it was like almost a sense of excitement where, I feel bad for my mom because I don't think she was so excited about the whole concept, especially when they told me I'd never play hockey again. Within a few months, the head coach on the campus at McGill found out I was there, and he's like, "You can walk and talk, you'll get to me. How about you play for me?" And I'm like, "Sure, that sounds great." Because again, you tend to go back to who you think you are, because we have these beliefs and these identities, and that life is trying to take us on a path. Imagine when we make this connection that both God and life are the same thing. How many think that life is one thing and God is something else? That God is good, God is magnificent, but boy, life is hard. Life is a struggle. Life sucks, right? Life is out to get me. Imagine if we had that attitude about the law of gravity. We keep jumping off a building, but we keep going, damn, it's so difficult. It's not fair. I feel like I'm the victim. Life is so hard. It's so difficult. It makes no sense. I just keep hurting myself. And that's, I guess, just the way life is. Unless we finally see that the law of gravity is giving us feedback. Not to punish us, not to judge us, to help us understand how the law works. Does that make sense? And when we understand how the law works, then we have the opportunity to what? To live in alignment with the law. And then we go, oh, the law is happening for us. If we understand the law of gravity, then we have all these new scientific laws, and next thing you know, we're flying in planes because we understand that there are physical laws, and now we're getting into a new era of understanding spiritual laws. Now, how many of you get those messages on Facebook where you're included in a big group, but you didn't ask to be, right? You get those sometimes? And I was, a few weeks ago, I saw this interesting post by someone, and they said, with all these superhero movies, they said, if you could be a superhero, what would your superpower be? And this post that I got was this girl who said that love would be her superpower. And I thought, wow, that's really interesting. Maybe she doesn't know that love already is her superpower. You don't have to get it. Isn't that amazing? You don't need it because you already are it. You are love. You are you are a source of love, of infinite love. You don't have, and the cool thing is about these whole spiritual laws, the more you give, the more you receive. How cool is that? Like you have access to infinite supply. And the more you give, the more you receive. And if your intention is to give in order to get, you don't receive anything. Isn't that perfect? And why is that? Because you can't fool life, can you? Life has a pure intention to serve your soul's highest good in every moment. And when you give your love to serve the highest good in every moment, then it comes back to you tenfold. It's a perfect spiritual system that is perfectly set up to support our soul's awakening. Now, we can do it the hard way and don't know that we don't know, or we can awaken to this idea and consciously participate in the process. And then, is this how we're going to change the world? All right? So imagine somebody who doesn't know that love is their superpower. And they go through their whole life trying to get love. You know, you're talking about older songs. We're talking about Lennon, right? How the great song, right? All you need is love. Well, what year did he sing that?
60-something?
60-something, which was a great year, right? I wasn't here yet, but I'm sure it was a great year, right? But the whole concept is, how about we evolve that song slightly? To all you need is love, to all you are is love. You don't need it at all. Just the whole concept that you even think that you need it is so old school. Because you already are love. All there is love. It is the essence of love. The essence of life is love. And you are a generator of that love. Does that make sense? That it comes from you. It's not something that you get from the outside in order to feel fulfilled. Right? How many people do you see go through a life where happiness is something that they're going to have one day? You know? It's when I get financial security, then I'll be happy. Right? When I get into a relationship, then I'll be happy. When I get a job, then I'll be happy. Again, it's one thing after another of when am I finally going to feel fulfilled? And understand that it's this connection, our oneness with life. That life is loving us. Life is supporting us. Does that make sense? When we resist life, what are we doing? Right? We're making life really hard. Is life meant to be hard? What's the opposite of dis-ease? Ease. Isn't that interesting? So when we have dis-ease, what is that feedback that life is giving us? Is that happening for us? Is it showing us that, oh, there's a problem, that our body is a perfect conduit for what? How many people think your body is just a vehicle to get through life, get old, and die? How many people do you know who live like that? Right? They just think, I'm going to get the most out of this, I'm going to get the most out of life, I'm going to get the most out of my body, get old, live as long as I can. It's just like that concept that everybody wants to go to heaven, but no one wants to die. Right? You ever notice? I always thought that was curious when I was a teenager in church. And I always used to ask two questions, especially after being given 15 months to live. And my two favorite questions were why and then what? And those questions got me kicked out of a lot of Bible studies and a lot of university classes. Because I noticed that they didn't like those questions about why and then what. So I remember one time being at church and they were saying that that everybody who didn't believe what they believed was going to hell. And I thought that was very interesting. And my parents weren't there, and I remember looking around the church, and there was some guy there that I knew, from Monday to Saturday, and he was there with his wife and his kids, and he looked like all playing the role type of thing. But I actually knew the guy, and I remember looking at him going, my dad's got more integrity than this whole church combined, and if that guy is getting into heaven, I don't even want to be there. Right? And I remember thinking, wait a minute, the kingdom of heaven is within. So where are these people that they want to go to heaven? A lot of them are going to church in order to get to heaven, kind of the fast track to heaven. At the same time, where they think that heaven is. If God's omnipresent, omnipotent, and omniscient, where could heaven or hell even exist except in our own consciousness? Our own conscious awareness of our divinity. Does that make sense? So as we embrace our true identity, we begin to live in harmony and in alignment with this law of life. How many think the law of gravity was sort of the birth to the age of science? Just that acknowledgement. And it started with an apple, boom, right on the head, right? Literally getting your attention, boom, take that. Now, how many of you think that in this next generation, this next era, the greatest discovery will be the understanding of the law of life? To understand the spiritual meaning and purpose of life so that we can live in alignment with it. That life is an intelligent spiritual system that is happening for us, supporting us. So if you knew that life is happening for you and supporting you, would you resist life? If you resist life, what are you creating? Would that be dis-ease? Right? Because you think that you know better. Some guys said, thy will be done. Right? So when Jesus said, when thine eye be single, your body shall be filled with what? With light. So your body shall be filled. Where does that light come from? Does it come from heaven this way or from heaven from the inside out? So if it's coming from the inside out, whose responsibility is that? Can anybody do it for you? Or is it for you to light what is already inside of you? to take your identity as a true divine being and to share that light and that love with the world. And as you do so with pure intention, there can be no dis-ease can exist in this perfect conduit. Does that make any sense? So as we begin to step forth into this new era, this new understanding of the law of life, we will see that all change is benevolent change. Now, do you think that's easy on the surface? So when you get diagnosed with 15 months to live and some guy's like, wow, that's awesome. Congratulations. That's happening for you. That's the greatest gift in your life. And I'm like, yeah. At the time, I probably would have bought it because I was kind of feeling that way myself. But I noticed in life, a lot of people, they don't like to hear that, do they? Right? So if something like that happened to you, how would you handle it? Would you go to the medical community and see what they could do for you? Would you go to the religious community? Where would you look for the answers? Or would you decide, oh my gosh, everything that I need to heal, I already have. That I have to learn how to use what has already been created inside of me. That this is an actual opportunity of a lifetime. How many of you feel that you are here, that your life is the opportunity of a lifetime? Do you think that one day we'll look back and define success? The ultimate success is fulfilling the purpose for which we've been created? I always tell people the sooner that you can have material success in life, the better. Hopefully you can do that in your 20s, right? Because the sooner you can do it and find out how curiously unfulfilling it is, it's very curious, right? I remember watching an interview with Matt Damon, and he was with Graham Norton, if any of you know who he is, a talk show host in Europe. And he asked Matt Damon, he was like, what did you do when you were so young and you were overnight success in Hollywood? And he says, overnight success? He's like, we've been working on it for 7 years. The last thing it felt like was an overnight success. He goes, what did you do to celebrate? He goes, well, I went home, my girlfriend went to sleep, and I sat in front of the TV with this, trophy, this award. He goes, and I couldn't help but feeling how curiously unfulfilling it was. And he said, all I could do was give thanks that I didn't spend my whole life trying to get this trophy thinking that this would make me happy. So his greatest blessing was, wow, it wasn't what I thought it was going to be, and I was so lucky to find that out. And that's the same way that I feel about being given 15 months to live. It was a great blessing, a great opportunity. At the same time, it helped me to understand that life is a law, the law of life, that it is refining our nature from human to divine. Does that make sense? So when life is trying to get your attention, you have the opportunity to embrace it and say, oh, what is life trying to express through me? How can I bring this to life to serve the highest good in divine alignment? And as we do that, we'll see that that love will begin to generate through us and begin to project from us. Now, who do animals tend to attack? People who are scared or people who are loving it? Scared. Isn't that curious? So we live in a world now where we have a lot of war, don't we? And what is war based on? Fear. And what do we tend to fear? We tend to fear what we don't understand, right? And some guy said, with all thy getting to get what? Understanding. He said to seek what first and everything else will be added unto you. Do you remember that? Seek what first? Seek the kingdom of heaven first and all else will be added unto you. It's the exact same question I had when I was given 15 months to live at 18. I thought, what is the one thing that if I understand this, everything else will fall into place? So the physical will be an effect that will happen naturally as the change has happened at the deepest causal level. So if we look at the physical, we look at the mental, we look at the emotional, and then where is the cause? Spiritual. We are spiritual and creative beings. We are perfectly designed to fully manifest love and light. Imagine that we have this opportunity of our lifetime to ignite this light and to project it out to the world. And as we do that, there is no separation. So one day I'll share with you a story how I met my biological mother. How again, we think that change is happening, but we don't understand sometimes why it's happening. So after a couple years after having the brain surgery, I was having seizures. Have any of you seen a seizure? It's not very pretty, is it? And the good thing with my seizures, they were happening during the night, so that I never got to see them, but unfortunately for anybody who was near me. Now, the thing with the seizure is that it's like the same as having a concussion. You have some memory loss and some other things. So after a couple of seizures, I was getting worried. I was having some memory loss. I went to the neurologist. I told him what was going on. So what did he want to do? Yeah, right? He wanted to put me on some medication to get rid of the seizures. Now, a couple weeks later, I got a letter in the mail. Anybody want to guess what that letter said? From the moment you open up this letter, your driver's license has been revoked. Now, I had just finished university. I had just started a new job with a financial company. I just bought a brand new sports car that I couldn't afford, but I thought the challenge of paying for it would be exciting. And so all of a sudden, in one moment, I lost my job, my source of income, my mode of transportation. In one moment, my whole life completely changed. Now, somebody would say, oh, that's terrible. Oh, poor you. Why did that happen? Oh, that's not fair. But interestingly, I was like, okay, so what's going on with this? So I called the neurologist, and I wasn't very happy with him at the time because I'm like, dude, why didn't you even tell me? I could have prepared for it, and he told me, well, I didn't have to. I'm above the law. And I was like, wow, okay. So I went to another neurologist, and I said, will you help me get my license back? He said no. I went to another neurologist. He said no. I went to 5 in a row who said no. For some reason, I went to a 6. And he said, you know what? I don't think it's fair. He said, you know what? I'm going to get your medical file. He got my medical file and he said, guess what? They only gave you 15 months to live, so they never did any medical research on you. So he goes, you're adopted. He goes, I contacted the adoption agency and I got a request form to get your medical history. Is that okay with you? I thought, cool. He said, maybe this will help us get your license back. At the end of the application, by my signature, there's a little box that said, would you be interested in meeting your biological mother? I said, sure. Always wanted to thank her. Always thought being adopted was cool. If I could give her a hug and say thanks, that would be great. If not, that's fine too. And so next thing you know, 3 weeks later in the mail, I get a letter from the adoption agency with my medical history. And that, I got to admit, that's pretty cool, right? When you see what your parents look like and that kind of thing, if you've been adopted. Now, it also said that we're highly underfunded. It takes 3 to 5 years to meet your biological mother. But if you send us $500 now, we'll try to make it 2 years. And I thought, well, I don't need to meet her that badly. And next thing you know, a few hours later that same day, I got a phone call. And it was from the adoption agency. And I'm like, wow, you guys are like, I got the medical history quickly, and now you're following up with a phone call? This is like, for a government agency, this is like far too, efficient. And she said, well, that's not why I'm calling. And I said, well, what are you calling? And she says, I just got off the phone with your biological mother. I'm like, what? And she says, do you believe in coincidences? She says, there's 17 offices here alone, and out of those 17 offices, somehow your file and her file ended up on my desk at the same time. And just by coincidence, I was flying back to Montreal that weekend because my sister was having her first baby. She happened to live in New Jersey, and she was flying to Montreal that weekend to visit her mother. 4 weeks to the day that I had my driver's license revoked, I was in Montreal having lunch with my biological mother. Now, how many of you think that that's just a coincidence? Or do you think that life knows what it's doing? And that when we begin to trust life, to trust the process, it doesn't have to be so difficult, does it? It was really neat too. When first time I went to my biological mother's place, I walked into her apartment and she had a big poster of Yogananda. And she, just 6 months before she met me, she was initiated into Kriya Yoga. Isn't that cool? Right? And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. And I guess we have lots to talk about. Right? And it turns out that she was Miss Teen Canada just a few months after she gave birth to me. And she was a model with the Elite Modeling Agency in New York. And she was tall, she was skinny, she had dark hair, she had blue eyes, and she talked 100 miles an hour. I bet you can't believe that. But it was just an amazing thing. And when you start to see these synchronicities, this harmony, when you begin to trust life, and then when you want to know that this, what we talked about, this near-death experience, this is actually a near life. This is normal, folks. This is normal. How many of you would like to experience this conscious union of soul and spirit? This is what the common path that all religions have in common. Buddha called it enlightenment, in the light. Jesus said, when thine eye be single, your body shall be filled with what? With light. What did Krishna talk about? Breaking through the veil. This veil is this kingdom of heaven, this near-death experience. This is normal. And we're on the verge. This is the new energy. This is the new era. This is the new normal. And we have the opportunity of our lifetime to usher in, to lead the collective consciousness into this new awareness. Now, how many of you would like to wait Or how many of you like to experience that as soon as possible, right? To make that your new normal. How many of you have appetizers, right? You have experiences where you just know, you can feel it. And you're like, I want that more often. How many of you wake up in the middle of the night where you're in divine communion? Have any of you had that experience where you wake up in total bliss, where you feel there's words that can't describe it? And then you're like, hey, wait a minute, I don't want to wake up in this, I want to live in this. And this is the kingdom of heaven on earth. This is our normal. This is our divine right. And this is what I'm trying to usher in here today, to let you see, to open your minds and to the possibilities that this is the normal. And that everything we need to fulfill this, we already have. So I hope that will give you something to talk about or to think about as well. I'll be doing a workshop later for any of you who are interested. And there's only one condition for the workshop, is that you be skeptical. I love skeptics. I found after doing workshops for a long time that skeptics are great because skeptics tend to ask the best questions. Except I also discovered there's two types of skeptics. There's the skeptics who don't ask questions and the skeptics who do ask questions. The skeptics who don't ask questions, they tend to stay skeptical. Because they don't get to, they want to be skeptical. And then there's the student of life skeptic. They're so skeptical that they ask questions, and they're so skeptical that they actually do the work. Imagine that. If you went to the gym every day and exercised for half an hour, would you have results? Would it matter if you were skeptical? Your body's a perfect what? Feedback mechanism. You cannot fool your body. How about the planet Earth? Is it a perfect feedback mechanism? If you plant carrots, what do you get? Every single time. There are no exceptions. And if you abuse Mother Earth, does she give you feedback to punish you or to give you feedback to inform you of how she needs to be treated? So if your body's a perfect feedback mechanism, the earth is a perfect feedback, and life is a perfect feedback mechanism. And it is all supporting us to fulfill this conscious union of soul and spirit. So in the workshop, I'll be going through that in detail of how you can fully experience it and what that looks like in daily life, by how you treat other people, by how you handle situations, and how you bring that to life as your new normal. So anyway, thank you so much, everyone. Thanks for listening, and I will be happy to talk to you later.